All right. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody today, and thank you for joining us. Again, I'm Matthew Ellsworth. I'm with the Association of Washington Public Hospital Districts. Today, we have a great opportunity for all of you that we'd like to share. You know, as we entered into 2024's years of amplifying the voice of the Washington Public Hospital Districts, we looked to those features that our members were saying, we need help, but we also want to be able to present ourselves to our community and understanding what a public hospital district is. And here at the association, as you can imagine, we take a lot of incoming calls from folks like you. And we came to realize very quickly that one of the needs amongst public hospital districts is updating their websites. And what does that mean? It's unique to public hospital districts in that you have a legal requirement for public disclosure and how you post your minutes and your agendas and how the public interacts with you in ways different than most non-public hospitals, EMS, and nursing homes do. And so along those lines, we're launching part of our initiative this year, the first step. And we've partnered with our friends at Site Crafting here in the state of Washington that you're going to hear from next to provide for you an opportunity to learn a little bit about what does it take. I'm a public hospital district that is either A, looking to update our website, or B, maybe you need to start fresh and begin again. Because if we took a survey amongst all of our members, we realized that some are out of date, some may be out of compliance. And so that's why we wanted to launch this. Our goal today is for one, to get some understanding about what it takes, break down what may be some of the fears about, oh my gosh, I got to rebuild a website, and understanding that may not be what you need, and that and also the process, quite frankly, isn't as painful as you may think. Here at AWPHD in the last 2 years, we went through this process ourselves. We relaunched our website and redesigned it with the help of our friends at Site Crafting, and so who's done a lot of work with special purpose districts, fire districts, school districts, and also hospitals around the state. So we've identified them as a great partner to present to you today. A few housekeeping items. Our webinar today is going to go just a little under an hour. We're going to leave some time at the end. We're going to present to you some other opportunities where AWPHD is willing to directly support you even further as you go down this journey. And then finally, throughout the process today, if you have questions in the chat, you're going to get a quick email address. We've chosen today to use the content for presentation time. And then if you want to email us your questions, we'll get back to you. We're going to put them to the Site Crafting team, to ourselves or other experts that may be necessary so that we can get those answers to you. But rest assured, they will be answered. Before I turn it over to Chuck Johnson with Site Crafting, I do have to tell you, many of you are familiar with the webinars we do throughout the year, and we already have 57 participants. That's incredible for our group. That's one of our largest we've ever done. But it shows you that we've struck a chord here, and we've hit an area that people are excited to get involved with. So with that, I'm going to introduce Chuck Johnson with Site Crafting to go ahead and take it away. Thanks, Chuck.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. So I've been told that it means you're old if you ask if everyone can see your screen, but I'm going to go ahead and ask and make sure that everyone can see my screen okay. Awesome.
Yes, all good.
Great, thank you. Okay, so first of all, I'm always bad at introducing myself and kind of explaining who I am and why we're here today. So I lay it all out on a slide to make it really clear. So I've been working here at Site Crafting for just under 11 years. I think I actually hit anniversary days next week or two. And I've been doing user experience for the past 15 years. I have a master's degree in human-centered design and engineering from University of Washington. And while I was there, I actually specialized in using technology for behavioral health changes. And so what I focus on is usability, user research, and designing things so that they're easy for people to use. And overall, one of the things I want to talk about today is that what's obvious to me, what's obvious to us, may not be obvious to others. So we're looking at design and how we structure things. We really want to focus on the patient and understand what their journey looks like and how that's different from what we typically see every day. And so for my team and within the Site Crafting team, we have a usability lab. One of the things that makes us different is that, and I'm actually sitting in the observation room of the lab right now, and we have done a lot of testing over the years. So we've done testing with hospitals. We've done testing for Find a Doctor tools, for Find a Location within hospitals. And we've tested hundreds of sites across a lot of different platforms. And so we have a lot of knowledge of how people actually interact with things when they're in the web. So here's a screenshot of an older Find a Doctor tool that we had built years ago and had done extensive testing on. And for hospitals specifically, we've done testing with well over 100 different participants. And some of these tasks have included scheduling an appointment through MyChart, looking up insurance information, trying to find a provider, trying to find locations, but all of those things that we've seen from patients that are important to them. And our goal is to make it easy for them to find what they're looking for. Because a lot of times we can maybe divert a phone call or divert an email if we can provide that information clearly on the website. And so from all of this, what have we learned? What has that led us to do with our process? How do we structure things? And I think one of the most interesting pieces, and I'm going to play a little clip here, is this is a Find a Doctor tool. And as we watch the clip, and everyone should be able to hear this.
With help for providers, that would be, so patient resources. There should be something that says like find a doctor.
So we ran a group of participants through usability test, and we asked them to find a doctor. And what you'll see in each of these is that the Find a Doctor call to action is right here. But for every participant, they struggle to find that call to action for Find a Doctor.
Or
It's showing me hospitals, it's showing me care clinics. I don't see find a doctor, find, like the other one, we were able to find family care.
The link I'm looking for, I would hope would be there, would be provider search, for provider search, or referral. This would be fun. With my assurance, it has to be like in a network, so we patient. Providers again. This is totally different. This is for doctors and people that are in the healthcare field. So this would not be what I'd be wanting at all.
so that was harder from the main website because I didn't know how to get to find a doctor. It seems like once I was here, I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want. But I couldn't seem to find where to get that. Because these are hospitals. Like there was this other information, but there wasn't, unless I missed it.
And so what we're trying to show is that something can be in front of a user, but they may not see it. And so it may be really obvious to us. And what we've experienced is a lot of times you'll spend a lot of time on your own website. You will know all of the things that work really well and all of the things that don't work. And what we've seen is that people look at it through their lens. And one of the most important things to remember when you're looking at a site is that you are not the typical user. And with hospitals, we have the broadest range of users we can possibly think of because we're serving everyone. We're also serving a lot of older populations where there may be vision impairment, there may be hearing impairment. So we have to make sure that the sites are structured in a way that's accessible and is usable. And so it also leads us to the question, how do people who are older interact with the web? Are their behaviors different? And yes, the answer is yes. So a lot of the newer trends that you'll see in web designs, they may not trickle up. And so what happens is if you have a button and it's not clear that it's a button, a user will not see that. And so you have to have clear calls to action and you have to simplify. Now, the other piece of this is that words matter. And this is especially tricky within medical language because we've got a lot of Latin going on. And one of the examples is the classic is the otolaryngology, being ear, nose, and throat. So wherever possible, we want to try to use language that reflects the language that the users are using themselves. And one of the hardest parts is we don't want the site language or the site navigation to reflect the org chart. So the org chart should not be reflecting out onto the world. We need to put things into categories that make sense for patients. And so what we want to do is we want to focus on their language. And we also want to make sure that we have some sort of translation system set up, so that way we can provide foreign language translation where it's needed. Another important thing is that Google really drives a lot of interactions. So if someone can't find something, they will go back to Google from whatever site they were on, and they will then search and try to change the query to find something within that. And so we'll see all sorts of interesting queries that lead people into the site itself, where they're appending the actual name of the hospital onto the end of their query to see if they can find some sort of content within that site that matches. Another important thing is that people don't tend to read. We're kind of inundated and we're in a wash of information. And so people are looking for information sent. So they might know a keyword and they're trying to find that. And so they will follow a path down. If they can catch the scent for that, they'll then follow that trail. So what's important is that we have clear calls to action. So what do we want the user to do? How are we trying to guide them on that journey? The other piece is having clear structured hierarchy within our pages. And so what we look for when we're redesigning a page is, what is the most important information? What do we want a user to do? We're assuming they're on a page and they're either there to learn something or to try to accomplish something. Users are task oriented. So how do we help them accomplish their task? One of the things that helps is laying out information. So using proper H1s, H2s and H3s, so that way the headings kind of descend in size, helps them then scan and see what is the most important information on the page to then what is less important for them to know as they go down. And one of the big questions is, if you are on a page where you want the user to be reading, you don't want to have things that can disrupt those patterns. So even having a block quote or a call to action in the middle of some text to break it up visually will cause them to flip from being in a deep read mode to a scan mode. And then they'll switch and they'll start scanning down the page. So when we're looking at pages, what's really important is knowing, what is the purpose of this page? What is the goal? What are we trying to accomplish here? So that we can then facilitate that for the patient. This is another important thing to know, which is users spend their time on other people's sites. And so generally when they're on a site that is outside of kind of entertainment or something where they're just trying to consume information, they're trying to accomplish that task. And then they're going to go and move back to whatever it was they were doing before. And unfortunately, outside sites drive a lot of the interactions that we see, and they drive the change in expectations for interactions. And so people are looking at Facebook, they're looking at Google, they're going to CNN, they're going to these other sites. And so in a sense, we have to look at what those sites are doing to understand how user interactions are changing and how those will apply to other sites. But it's important to know that they're coming from somewhere else, they're trying to accomplish something quickly, and then they're going to close that tab and move on to something else entirely. And so what we want to do is we want to support the patient's journey. And so the goal of this is meet them where they are. And it may start with them researching a condition or a treatment. They might be exploring their different options for providers. And I know with public health districts, this can also vary because depending on the size of the hospital, you may have a lot of providers or you may just have a handful. But they want to know more about the person. They want to know the person's name. They want to know their background. They want to learn about them to know that they're in good hands. The other big piece is that they're interested in getting care. So how can we help them get to that care that they need? Maybe in this case, they need to just see a provider for, primary care. Maybe they need to go to the emergency room. How do we facilitate the pathway that they need to take to get to the right care when they need it? Now, it's typically more kind of the my chart side, but one of the things we've seen is that people will call because they're trying to interpret test results. And this is a difficult problem. It's not a solvable one within our context, but even having information that is helpful to them, can help them understand when they get some sort of information released to them. And what does that information mean? What can I do with it? Another piece of this is navigating referrals. So someone going to a site and trying to figure out, they've been told they need to schedule with another doctor. Who is this doctor? What do they need to do? And then finally, the big one is before care even starts, people will be looking for insurance. They'll be looking for financial assistance information. And then they want to know, once they've received care, where do I go to pay my bill? How do I pay for the actual care that I've received? The other really important thing, we've seen this shift. I feel like I've been around long enough to have gone from kind of the desktop world exclusively to then the mobile world. And now the mobile world, the traffic actually outpaces the desktop. And what's really interesting to me about analytics for hospitals is you could see a pronounced difference on weekends and holidays. And so what happens is when you hit a weekend or holiday, the mobile traffic spikes even higher and it becomes really dominant. So it goes from about 55, 60% on a weekday to 75, 80% on a weekend. And so what we typically see is that internal staff are also using and they're navigating on the pages, or people are navigating to hospital pages while they're at work. And when they get to the weekend, they shift entirely and are almost exclusively mobile. So it's really important when we're looking at sites that we structure them. And so we do what's called responsive design. And what that does is at any screen size, as the site kind of shrinks down to smaller and smaller sizes, the elements will rearrange naturally. So that way things are still findable, things are still accessible, and it's easy for a user to use. But it's really important that we get the mobile experience right, because people, especially if it's in an emergency, what happens is they kind of shift mentally and they have a tendency to do a little bit of cognitive tunneling. So they're focused on only one thing. So how do we make sure that the calls to action are clear, the menu items are clear, and we can get them to the care they need? So having gone through analytics from different hospitals over the years, we found that there's kind of this list of things that users are doing pretty consistently. So we know when they're coming to a site, some of the top kind of 10, 20 items, as we aggregate them down, they're trying to find medical records. Maybe it's through my chart. They want to find a doctor. They want to find a location. They're looking for services, health insurance information, financial assistance, and then classes and events. So for public health districts, it's a little bit different too, because there are things that patients are looking for as the main calls to action, but there are also things that public health districts are legally required to have. So meeting minutes, that type of information also has to be there, but it may not be the most common thing that a user is looking for when they're accessing the site, but it still has to be findable, which presents kind of an interesting challenge because we also have to have that available within the navigation to make it easy for people to find that. Another thing that's really important is there's a tendency to kind of copy others. We hear a lot, look at the Cleveland Clinic. They're doing this thing. It must be really good. And that's not necessarily true for your population. Just because they're doing something within a website does not mean that it's the best option for your website. And so that's one of the challenges. It's difficult to just kind of copy one for one from one hospital to another. And this is the tricky part, because if you're a leader in medical research, we've had a lot of this over the years. We'll maybe look at like Sloan Kettering and say, hey, they're a leader in medical research. It doesn't mean necessarily that they're a leader in usability. So they're doing amazing things with medicine. Does not mean that it's easier to find a doctor on their site than another. And additionally, what works for one organization in one context may not work for another. So the best thing that we can do is to set you up so that we can learn from your patients and we can understand how do we structure a site that meets their needs. So we do this in a couple ways. One of the best ways to find out how people are using language, what they're referring things, is to look at search queries. So if there's an internal search setup, maybe there's a search for location doctor or a site search overall, we'll look through those queries. We want to know what terms patients are using. So what are they calling things? How are they referring to them? And we'll also look at Google search queries. So sometimes this requires a little bit of additional setup within Google, but we want to know, what are they asking for? What are they looking for? What are they saying? And in what language are they saying it? So we can then use that to help inform how we should be titling things within pages or headings, as well as navigation items. Another activity that we found really helpful is people who are answering phone calls tend to know about issues on the website before anybody else. And what we've noticed is they'll have sticky notes actually up at their desks with common phone numbers, common responses, things where they have a lot of experience getting the same inquiry over and over again. So they'll build themselves little cheat sheets. So one thing that we found is really helpful for finding out what we should change on a site or how we should update the site is to ask people who are answering the phone and ask them, what would you change about the site? What could we do to improve the site? And they'll usually have a list of items that they can kind of hand over, or a couple helpful suggestions that they've built up because they're already working around something that may need to be updated or hasn't been updated yet. Another aspect is finding out where users are struggling. So where are the pain points? Where are they able to find information? Where can they not find it? And what we have is we've built a little polling system that we put and embed in the bottom of pages, which is a pretty quick install. And we found the best way is just to ask them. So we can phrase the question a couple different ways. This is just two examples, but was this page helpful? And did you find what you were looking for? And once you click no on this, it will then ask you, what could we do to improve this page? And so by looking at the different pages and seeing the types of responses we get, we can then make updates to the pages based off of what users are telling us they can't find or they're struggling with. So that way we can better target the information for future patients who are accessing it. We also look through Google Analytics. So we want to make sure that Google Analytics is set up properly, and then we can see what pages are people visiting frequently. And so we can tell through analytics where they're going, how long are they staying on a page. And what's interesting is how long they stay. It may mean that the page is really great and they're interested in reading it, or it may mean that they can't find what they're looking for, and so they're struggling and staying longer on a page. We also pick up how often they visit. So are we seeing a user come back frequently? And then when are they visiting? So what time of day? Are they visiting more at the beginning of the month, end of the month? But the important thing to know is that analytics does not show us why. So we know how they're accessing the site. We know how they're using things, but we don't know the why. The other piece is that a high number of visits does not mean a high value for the page. Sometimes there's pages that are great as landing pages or hub pages. And sometimes a page is getting a lot of visits, but it's because they're passing it along the way. So we want to know from the feedback, is this page valuable to users? And then use that to help guide us with getting proper content and proper structure for pages. So I know a lot of this can be maybe intimidating, and coming from my perspective, these are things that we've seen a lot of, but there are ways that we can do small changes that can lead to bigger impacts. And so a couple of these things that really have kind of a high gain is, number one, just clear navigation. So what can we do to simplify a menu, make it more intuitive? And what we can do is we can group information under really clear headings, and we can add a search bar for quick access. We actually ran into issues with search over the years, so we built our own search out that allows hospitals to curate the results so they can pin items to the top or set their own custom calls to action. So during COVID, what we would do is we would structure it so that when you searched for COVID, it would tell you where you could get tested. It would tell you information about hospital protocols around COVID, and then would include the more organic site search results. But the idea is that it's your search, so you should be able to control what the results are for the search to help users. And again, from analytics earlier, we know people are trying to find certain things. So how can we structure navigation so that we can make those things easy to find? And if we take these items and we group them, we find is we have bill pay, which is going to be associated typically with financial assistance. People will look for those things in the same areas. So we want to relate those and put them on a page so you can find both. If we can set these kind of hub and spoke patterns, we can have a hub where we can collect like information, like billing, and then we can send them out to the specific information that they need. And then what we'll do is we'll have health insurance. It may be a top item or it may be as in-page content within a hub for billing, as well as classes and events, because we want users to see content in multiple places. So if there's a class or event, we want to reference it and have it in one overall kind of calendar section, but also that if they're looking for maybe more information on maternity or birthing classes, we can then provide what those classes are. So if they're looking at a service, we can send them then to classes and again, capture them kind of in that hub where they land on that page and then send them to the individual thing that they're looking for. So here's two navigations that we've done. One of these is pretty recent, but this gives you an idea of how we try to simplify menu items down for the top navigation. And then here we have more of our kind of utility navigation and then our search. In the case of the Vancouver clinic here, the I want to is a drop down of quick links. So we pulled in and looked at what are the most common actions that users are taking. So these are all structured as actions so that access medical records will take them then immediately into my chart. Bill pay will take them into paying their bill. And another piece that I find interesting, there's different ways of referring. So we've seen providers, we've seen doctors, we've seen clinicians. Our experience in usability testing is that there's not a distinction for users between nurses and doctors necessarily. They view everyone as a doctor until they're told otherwise. And so when they're searching for something, we tend to call it find a doctor because that's what's gotten us the best result for them understanding that they're trying to find care with a specialist. So other big recommendation, we want to make sure that the site is mobile responsive. And what this means is that we take a look at the site structurally and we figure out how we can break that down so that as you kind of scale down to mobile, all of the information should shift and the menu should be simplified so that way you can easily get to what you're looking for. We also have a number of different devices that we test with. So we're looking at different browsers, we're looking at different devices, and we want to make sure that it looks good on every different screen size and for different devices. Knowing too that people may not do regular updates. And so what can we do to make sure that we're capturing all the different demographics of users for the different devices that they're using? Another big recommendation is accessible design. So we take a look at the site and we run it through an ADA audit. We want to make sure that we have text in the right places and structured in the right way. So what that means is that if you have an image, the image should have a description. It should be alt text. And so that describes what that image is. So for a vision impaired user, it will read that to them as they're going through with their screen reader. This also includes captions too. So making sure not just the alt text, but that there's a good caption for different images. And then we talked about kind of the structure earlier of H1, H2, H3. And it's not just for users who don't have vision impairment. H1, H2, H3, these headings are also used by screen readers, and it helps prioritize the information so that they understand as they're hearing it and the screen reader is reading it off, what level of importance it's structured as within the page's hierarchy. We also run everything through the color checkers that the ADA uses. So we want to have high contrast color schemes for readability. And so it means there's certain colors that pass and then certain colors that don't pass. So everything has to pass the ADA check because that is the metrics that used to see if there's enough kind of contrast between text and a background. So one of the most famous examples is if we have an image and then we put text over that image, it can be difficult if there's white text and then there's a white image or kind of a fade in the image, which makes that text then difficult to read. So appointment scheduling and online services, it's great if there's some system set up so that they can easily schedule. People want to know, can I schedule? How do I schedule? And this is typically something that gets a little bit more difficult because doctor availability, sometimes it can be possibly they can schedule with this person. So what we do is we set up systems so that way doctors can have categories and you can set kind of a custom text for what the call to action is. Maybe it's you have to call to schedule. Maybe there's a portal that they can schedule through, but there has to be some variability here. And so we try to support that programmatically. So that way a user knows what the clear call to action is for them and what to do for that particular doctor. So one of the biggest complaints that we'll see from patients is they're trying to find a location, they're trying to find an address, they're trying to find a phone number. And so if we have a location, we want to make sure that we've got the building with the facility name. We want to make sure that the address is clear, the hours, phone number, and services. And so we actually built out a little hours and scheduling tool. So that way hours can be set. So you can see whether a hospital or a facility is opened or closed when you're actually on the site looking at it. Additionally, Google will consume this. So we want to get this metadata in the right format. And when we get the metadata in the right format, Google grabs this and then will render it and can kind of read it and understand it from kind of the crawler perspective, and then show that more easily when it's pulling information in for a map or if it's managed through Google My Business, where hours can be set. Additionally, with providers, and we talked about this a little bit, but we want to make sure that there's addresses or addresses, depending on where that doctor or provider is, as well as clear phone number. And the questions that a user is asking when they're looking, can I schedule with this provider? What do I need to do to schedule? And we want to make sure that that is prominent and easy to find. So if they're looking at a provider's profile or they're looking at kind of a list of providers, they want to understand what do I need to do and how do I do it? Again, a lot of these are smaller updates that have really big impacts. So one of the things we work on is keywords. We want to make sure that the right words and phrases are being used in the right places. And so it means that we're trying to write for humans, not just search engines, but it's important for both. So we want to use human words and explain things. So if we have a page title, we might have the page title be /find a doctor /locations. So that way it's easy to see what the thing is, and then Google can interpret that. So we want to make sure that our page titles are clear, that our URLs and our page titles are pretty close as far as what they're saying. And then within our H1s, because this is that top heading on the page, Google's looking at that top heading to see what the page is about. So we want to make sure we're using the right keywords and some of those same words that we were seeing from search queries as in the site as well as coming from Google. And we want to put those within body content as well, because what that does is that helps move it up within search rankings so that when they do end up in Google looking for something, we'll have more matches and better matches for them to get what they're trying to find. And again, it's important when we're doing kind of search engine work and we're trying to name things that we are writing for humans. So how do we use natural language that people use to describe what they're looking for and what they're trying to find? So I mentioned alt image text, but what we want here is some sort of a description for the image that explains exactly what's happening within the image. Because as a screen reader goes through for accessibility, the person can't see the image, but the screen reader can read through the alt image text. So we want to make sure that every image has alt image text. And it's not a difficult update to do, but it's really impactful because if we can update that and give descriptions for each piece of the text, it can then look at it and read it off for the screen reader. And again, it should be described in human-friendly language. So how would you describe this image if you were describing it to someone else who couldn't see it? And then we want to put that within the alt image text, and it makes it really easy for screen readers and makes it much more accessible. And then, of course, a big thing is outdated content. So what we recommend is regular content reviews. We also have a full content team, and Angie's on the call right now, and she runs that side. What they'll do is they'll go through and review the content. We work together to try to set up a schedule to, sometimes we'll do it around daylight savings, which we just had, but we want to make sure that information is accurate and up to date, and the content isn't growing old, and we have something that's outdated that's still on the site. Kind of more details about writing for humans. The goal is to use people-friendly language. And within that, when we have our page titles, we want to keep them descriptive, but we want to be at max 55, 60 characters. We don't want to get too long with that. There's also something called a meta description, where we're describing the page to the search engine. And so again, we want to kind of keep it at a smaller character count, so below 160, but each page should have its own unique description. And it should say exactly what's happening with that page, what is the purpose of the page. So that way, search engine can grab that and then help render to a user to let them know, here's what this page is about. And then I provided the example of URLs, but we want them to be simple and human readable. So if we have hospital.com, find a doctor is really clear as to what it is and what you can do within that page. Now, I also talked to development team a bit around recommendations for cybersecurity. So what are kind of smaller things that can be done that will have a bigger impact? And we're going to walk through a couple of these and just want to give you a sense of what the options are and what's available. So probably the most impactful one is making sure that you're doing regular updates. And so you'll have someone who's hosting the website. And we use a group called Pantheon who does regular updates and helps us with that. So that way, all of the plugins and the underlying software is consistently updated. And what that does is it removes a vector for attacks, because you can't exploit a new plugin that's been updated as easily as you can update look at one that's not updated that has security issues. So if there's known security flaws, we want that updated immediately. And the goal of this is to get any known security updates into the pipeline and updated before something becomes an issue. We use Pantheon, as I mentioned, and it includes regular updates, but what we want from a hosting platform in our ideal scenario is that they're doing automated backups, that they're doing some sort of write protection so that we don't have malicious actors writing something into our file system or into our code. And then using two-factor authentication. So that way there's some additional check so that if someone does get a password, they can't get in. Additionally, we recommend automated monitoring, DDoS protection. These are things that we help with, as well as managing HTTPS and SSL certs. So again, a lot of the theme of this is trying to remove potential vectors where people could attack. And one of the biggest ones is people. So phishing is a big problem across industries, and especially with hospitals. So what we want to do is make sure that our user accounts are very secure. We can do this by password requirements. So if we can require strong passwords, and especially those with admin privileges, it really helps, because that way it's not a simple password or one that's easily guessable, or something that, a bot can figure out how to go through and just do a massive check on passwords and usernames. We also like requiring two-factor authentication or multi-factor authentication, but if we can't do that reasonably for everyone, we recommend doing it at least for admins and users who have critical site functionality access. So that way, the two-factor authentication gives us that additional check on things to make sure that the person signing in is who they're saying they are, and that they should be allowed to sign in. Another piece of this is just making sure that the right people have access, and that the only people who have access to critical things are people who should have access to that critical site functionality. And so we build out and structure kind of roles and permissions to make sure that we're kind of keeping things in order for who should have the highest privileges for an admin versus maybe someone's just editing content, or maybe they're just updating here and there. So how do we structure those permissions to give the right people access to the right things? So another service that we use is Cloudflare. It's kind of interesting because Cloudflare, they're very unique in the industry, and they have really become the backbone of the internet. So what they're doing is they're monitoring, blocking suspicious traffic automatically, and they're also mitigating against DDoS attacks. So this helps us. We use this for all of our sites to make sure that we don't get taken down by a malicious bot network that decides to target the site. So another really great tool that you can use, and you can see how your site is doing, is Mozilla Observatory. And Mozilla Observatory allows you to put in your domain name, and then you can take a look and see where there might be secure vulnerabilities within your site. So it's going to look at if you have HTTPS implementation, it's going to look to see if you have a content security policy, CSP, and how effective that is. It'll check HSTS and checks a whole lot more, but it will give you then kind of a readout of where there might be some areas that you can improve for your security. And so part of that is that content security policy. And what this is we update the site header, and this can actually help mitigate against cross-site scripting attacks, and also mitigates against packet sniffing attacks. So this is a simpler update, but it can be really impactful because it's kind of setting out the security policy within the site and saying what's acceptable for the site, where traffic should and shouldn't be going. And so gone through a lot there as far as recommendations, because I'm hoping some of this is a little bit more digestible, because I want everyone to feel that this is approachable. These are solvable problems. These are things that we can do small changes that can have really big impacts, but we do more than just that. So we're kind of a full service shop. And what that means is that we offer these research services as far as usability testing, understanding users, how they're interacting with your site. We also offer more on the strategy side. So what can we do to improve your site's content, your SEO, marketing? What things can we do to help your content strategy to help it be more effective? So how do we make that content, that information as good as it can be? How do we structure that? We also have a creative team, so branding, website design. So as we're walking through the process, we go from everywhere from just doing targeted updates to content or targeted updates to usability and user experience to full-fledged site redesigns, where we'll go through the entire process of understanding users, what we can do, and then wireframe that, design it, and then move into development side, which is building a site out. And so for us, what we can help with is from ideation to implementation. And we know that each hospital and system is unique. And so it needs to be treated that way so that we can better understand what are the unique challenges that you're facing to make the best possible experience for you and for your users. And depending on your needs, whether it's search engine optimization, whether it's content, usability, accessibility through ADA, security, rebranding, full website redesign, we have a large team, just over 30 people that specializes in the web. And so we are experts in understanding how to make a better experience for users using websites online and also being very secure in that. So this should say thank you now, because the questions are going to be sent in.
Great. Well, thanks, Chuck. I'm gonna have you pull down your screen there and
Yeah.
just a few closing comments and thoughts for everybody. First of all, I'll say that we did record today's session and it's available at awphd.org. So one, you can go there and please do share this recording with anyone else on your team or other PhD colleagues that you do have, and you're welcome to do so. Also, spend some time at awphd.org. I think what you'll see is an example of some of the usability features of a good website in the public hospital district space. ADA compliance, easy to use, and you'll see reflective of a lot of these tips that you've seen today that have been incorporated. Also, I want to tell you that you can do this. And I know the attention we've had today has been about you've been thinking about doing it. And the ability to engage in this process of somebody who's done it ourselves, it really is something that is achievable along those ends. And we're going to make a commitment to you to help. First of all, I want to thank Mary Kay Clunies-Ross of Sunshine Communication. She helped out in our chat there answering some questions. Mary Kay is also part of a greater effort that we have, again, of amplifying your public hospital district voice in helping our districts in building those communication plans and teaching their communities about what a public hospital district does. However, when it comes to the website design, one of the things that we've offered, and you'll see it in the chat here in a moment, is you can apply for funds. We're offering up to $10,000 to our districts on a first come, first served basis to help you go and do this work. While we appreciate our partners at SiteCrafting, and we've had a great presentation from them today and a great experience, if you want to use that money to upgrade your website on your own, you don't have to use SiteCrafting. Again, we have a positive experience there, but we want you to go out and build websites that serve your need, but also help your community get that conduit into the work that you're doing within your district. And so there in the chat there, if you want to go ahead and click on that, it's a very simple letter of request, and we'll be happy to help you down that process. And then finally, I want to be sure and do thank my partners at SiteCrafting. In the chat there is their website as well, if you want to learn more about them. So with that, I want to thank all of you for your attention today. And please feel free to continue to email us with questions. We'll bounce them off the appropriate people to get them back to you. And finally, that encouragement to all of you to go out and take this opportunity and use this year to go and upgrade and make sure that you have a web presence out there that is compliant to being a public hospital district, that is secure, and also creates that customer service experience for those in your district. So thank you once again for attending today, and I look forward to seeing many of you in the future. Take care.